what are some of the priorities or concerns that you've heard from the community, even just in these first few weeks, that you think you need to might address?
I kind of had an idea about where I wanted to go and what I'd like to do, and I've decided to really just kind of press pause and spend more time listening. I've really distilled it down to three things. If we get to the point where our organization, anybody in our organization can tell you, hey, these are the three things that are a priority, I'd be happy about that. And number one is to...
Hello and welcome to the Something Better podcast. I'm Joe Conroy, your host and the Public Information Officer for the City of Bakersfield. Before I get to our first guest here today, I do want to mention, thank you to all of our subscribers, our loyal listeners from over the months. We've been doing this for a little over a year now, and we really appreciate if you are listening every 2 weeks or so that we do these, however often we're doing them, and we hope you're enjoying what you're listening to, learning a little bit more about the city and what we do and what we provide and the programs that are going on here. And if you haven't already, please subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and be sure to tell your friends, if you're liking what you're hearing, and maybe they can learn something as well. With that said, we're going to jump into our guest here this time, and we have a first. We were just talking about this. This is a first on the podcast. We have the Chief of Police, Brent Stratton.
Well, thanks for having me, Joe. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
Always, I've listened to several of the podcasts, and so it's cool. Cool to be here.
Well, we appreciate that, and we appreciate you being here. So I just said, Chief Stratton, is that sunk in for you yet? Is that still weird?
It still feels weird. Yeah, it feels a little bit weird. I think we're on about halfway through my second full week.
Okay.
And so still just trying to get settled a little bit, trying to get my legs underneath me, trying to figure out, what are the things that truly need my attention. What are some things that I might be able to get some assistance on from the team, and what are some things I might need to reprioritize, and just trying to figure all of it out. So still trying to figure out what my rhythm is going to be, and I think it'll be helpful too when I hopefully get to backfill my old position. That will help too. But in the meantime, I'm just trying to get a feeling for the day-to-day.
Yeah. That kind of actually got into one of my questions was, what were your first few weeks like? So it's just trying to settle in and fill in the big chair, huh?
Yeah, it's been busy. Every time I've ever promoted, I've always tried to serve my boss. I've tried to understand what goes into their schedule, what their job is about, what are the things I might be able to take off their plate. And every time, once I've gotten to that position, I'm like, oh, I didn't realize there was all these other things that they did.
Yeah.
And as one of Chief Terry's assistants, I was an assistant chief for 6 years, so I felt like I had a pretty good handle on what day-to-day was. But even now, there's so many things like, oh, I didn't know we did that. I didn't know we did that. I didn't know we did that. And so it's definitely busy. There's always something. And look, we're a big city, right? And so there's always something that's happening, and just trying to stay involved and engaged. And so there is certainly a lot. I get pulled in a lot of different directions, but I love it. I love it, live it, eat it, and breathe it. And so I'm 100% good, happy, and I'm humbled. I'm honored. I'm excited. I'm all those things. I'm ready to run, and so I'm really looking forward to the opportunity.
That's great. I've got a couple of questions I want to get to, but you did mention something. So you're surprised at some of these things. Tell me one or two of those things that maybe surprise you that you're like, is there something specific that jumped out at you? Yeah.
The amount of maybe emails, and not always good ones. I have a lot, but there's a fair amount of hate mail that comes through.
So you get shielded from that, even as an
aggressive
AC?
A little bit on some of those things. The amount of just asks that come from different areas within the community and stuff all good stuff, things that you want to be a part of and you want to be able to support. But there's a lot of those.
Being pulled in a lot of directions, huh?
Being pulled a lot of different directions. There's a lot of groups, well-meaning community groups and organizations to be able to partner with and to be able to work with. And so just there's there's a lot that's coming up, and then we're a big organization with a little over 700 people that work there. So there's always going to be something that pops up there. It's a big budget, and this is budget time and budget time of the year, and so
you got thrown right in.
That my very first day was doing budget presentation to the council, and thankfully Chief Terry did a really good job of preparing us for this over the last several years and getting to be a part of it and work towards it, and so it wasn't foreign, and we'd worked towards the budget stuff with him, so I feel very comfortable with it. But just there's a lot. There's always something.
Yeah. So we'll backtrack now to kind of my first questions. Tell us a little bit about your background. Where are you from here? Did you always want to be a police officer? Did you always want to be a police chief? Tell us a little bit about your background there.
Yeah. So born and raised in Bakersfield.
Okay.
And like everybody that's born and raised here, you say you can't wait to leave, and I couldn't wait to leave, and I ended up going to college in San Diego, which was fantastic, and then I couldn't wait to move back to Bakersfield. And while I was in college, my senior year, I started applying with the police department. I always wanted to be a police officer.
Okay.
My dad was a police officer. My mom worked at the police department, was professional staff in our police department. So I grew up within the department, and I grew up with a very favorable opinion of police officers. I tell people that my first show and tell was a Bakersfield police officer. I still remember the officer's name. His name was Tim Fletcher, and he had his dog named Vix. And I always wanted to be a canine officer. Never got to be, but I remember that. And I remembered too, for Halloween a couple of years, I was a Bakersfield police officer. My mom made me a Bakersfield Police Department, outfitted me with Bakersfield police patches.
I think I've seen the photo.
Yeah, and so that's what I've always wanted to do. There's a brief stint in time where I thought I was going to be a professional baseball player, but we realized,
don't we all?
Once we realized that wasn't going to happen, then it was being a police officer. And my dad begged me to get a degree in something else just in case you get hurt, you get fired, you don't like it. And so, I did as kind of a fallback plan, and hoped I'd never need it. And so far, I haven't needed it. So thankfully, I haven't had to use the backup plan. But this was the only department I applied for, the only place I've wanted to work, and the only place I've wanted to work and continue still want to work. I haven't applied anywhere else. I went through some of the there's kind of some different headhunter firms and things that ask you to go and apply at different places, and I politely declined because this is where my first choice, and really where I want to be, and where I still want to be. And then just working at the department, like everybody, started out in patrol, and I spent time in our directed policing unit, which was kind of like a proactive problem-solving unit, kind of like what Impact does today.
Okay.
Then I worked in our gang unit for 4 years, and I was on our SWAT team for 12 years as an officer, as a team leader, as the commander of the team. I was a detective, robbery homicide detective, for a while. I worked in our major crimes as a sergeant, our career criminal apprehension team, which started when AB 109 came out, and working on those who had were on high-level supervision at that point. Then our violent criminal apprehension team, which is still around today, which is SWAT team members that work ongoing and apprehending those who have arrest warrants for some of the most violent crimes that we have, and I really enjoyed that job. Then I worked in internal affairs and kind of started learning a little bit more about the admin side of the house. I promoted to lieutenant, became a watch commander and lieutenant, and then I went to our professional standards, which was at that point doing audits and inspections and starting to just check on our work and how is our work being done the way that we think it should be done. I went back to internal affairs and then promoted from there. I tested for captain and assistant chief. I came out on the captain's list, got promoted, and we had some turmoil within the police department. And I was only a captain for about 2 weeks, and I became an assistant chief and was assistant chief for 6 years when I promoted. So altogether, I've worked at the department for 22 years. But that's a little bit of the
You've done a little bit of everything.
Backstory. Yeah. So as a lieutenant, I enjoyed being very operationally focused, and throughout my entire career, I was very operationally focused. But once I made lieutenant, I started looking and thinking, maybe I would like to continue to promote. And I started again thinking that maybe I might like to be the police chief. And I remember then Chief Martin talking to me about some of the things that I needed to learn. And so in addition to learning some of the data and the audits and inspections and internal affairs, I then managed our records, our communication center, and our property room, and working with our professional staff and learning how dedicated they were and how their jobs all fit into the overall mission within the department, all the work that went into that. And then, over the last few years, learning more about budget and working with, the Department of Justice on our stipulated judgment. And I've done more in some professional organizations. I'm the president of the California Association of Tactical Officers. I'm on an International Association of Chiefs of Police Patrol and Tactics subcommittee. There's a state tactical advisory association that I do some work with as well, and I teach some classes throughout the state and do some speaking across the country at different conferences and things like that. Just trying to understand trends and what's happening in other places and what can we learn from other places that we can take back and bring back here to Bakersfield. So it's given me a lot of exposure in a lot of different areas, all of which I think prepared me well for the position.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like, at some point you did make a concerted effort to, take that track to become a chief. You realized this is something that I do want to be an officer or a lieutenant or a captain, but eventually lead the organization and made those the steps that needed to be taken in order to do that.
Yeah, I went back to school. I went to Cal State for my master's and got it in public policy and administration, just learning more about budgets and line items and policy development and some of those areas as well. And I needed to go and sit in a class, and I needed to hear from instructors and to really get that education to help kind of change my perspective and move me forward a little bit as well. So like I said, it was probably about 10 years ago or so when I'd promoted and started to think like, okay, I think this is something that could be of interest to me, and just kind of looking ahead at where the command staff was laid out then, and the ages and the tenure of everybody, and where I was in relation to my peers. And I thought that there was a decent chance that if I didn't screw anything up, I could be competitive for the position.
Well, it seemed to have worked out.
So far,
yeah.
We'll find out.
So, you said you're from Bakersfield.
Born and raised.
How do you think that helps somebody being from the community where they're going to be the chief of a police department?
Yeah, I think it's actually a really unique thing. In most places, as I go throughout the state and throughout the country, most places cops either can't afford to live where they police or they don't want to live where they police. So we have a very unique situation, a very unique setup that we have here in Bakersfield. I think it sets us up very naturally for a community-oriented policing philosophy where our officers are also members of our community. They have a very vested interest in outcomes and how things are going within our community, and it doesn't happen like that in most other places. Mm-hmm. So I think that is an advantage that we have within the police department. It's an advantage that I have here, and there is an accessibility piece where our command staff, our supervision, our leadership, our line level officers are all people that, because they live here, they all have these own relationships as well with different community organizations and community-based organizations and community interest groups, that they have some of these relationships to be able to work with. And I am a relationship person. I think those are important. I think they're important to policing. And so I think these are some advantages that the Bakersfield Police Department has that other places don't necessarily have.
Yeah. You mentioned you've heard from the community. You've been going through your email inbox. You've been seeing what's out there. What are some of the priorities or concerns that you've heard from the community, even just in these first few weeks, that you might address?
Yeah, it's really good. Good question. I kind of had an idea about where I wanted to go and what I'd like to do, and I've decided to really just kind of press pause and spend more time listening. And so I've spoken with every group that's invited me, every media organization that's invited me, every news interview we've taken, and it's been really good for me to just listen and to ask people, what are your main concerns, or what do you think about the police department, and where do you think that you'd like to see a little bit more? And so there are a variety of things to work on. There's no shortage of things to be able to work on. I'm naturally drawn to gun violence work and gun violence reduction strategies. I think that's very interesting to me, and we need to continue to make that an area of focus. And I'd really like to explore a little bit more the relationships and intimate partner and domestic violence, and what we might be able to do to apply our gun violence reduction strategy model towards the domestic violence and intimate partner space. I'm very interested in improving traffic safety within our community. Distracted driving, drugs and alcohol for sure. But the area that I'm most interested in learning about and exploring more is school safety around schools, and working on what we can do to increase our presence and in that regard. And when it comes to traffic safety, we talk about kind of the 3 E's, education, enforcement, and environment. And the police department comes involved in the education as well as in the enforcement standpoint. And the city's been doing a lot within the environment to try to adjust the environment to make it the roadways more safe. And we've made some progress there, but we've got some more to go. I think trying to figure out how we can continue to try to impact homelessness is important. With the balance of having people realize that being homeless is not a crime, and those who are homeless aren't necessarily criminals, but there are criminals who are homeless. And so really focusing in on the criminal component of the homeless and some of those, the crimes that are impacting homeowners and business owners. And so that's an area I'd like to be able to focus on as well. But I've really distilled it down to 3 things. If we get to the point where our organization, anybody in our organization can tell you, hey, these are the 3 things that are a priority, I'd be happy about that. And number 1 is to improve safety and the feeling of safety. I think that this is actually a very safe community. I think the numbers would tell you that this is a pretty safe community, but I don't think a lot of people feel safe. And so we have a lot of work that we can do in educating and sharing information and actual information, and not hysteria or social media rumors, and really helping people to feel safe in their own community. I think I want to work to solve problems, and I want to work to enhance relationships. And so those are kind of the 3 big areas, 3 big buckets, I suppose you could say, that I really want to focus on. And there's a lot that goes into each of those 3 areas, but those are some things that I'd like for the people in our department to know, that these are the priorities that their work is going towards accomplishing.
Yeah. Like you said before, no shortage of things to focus on, or for the community that they want you to focus on. You mentioned the gun violence reduction and how it's working, and I do want to touch on that real quick. We've seen the numbers over the last few years. We've seen improvements there.
Big numbers, big improvements.
And that's been somewhat reported on, and I think we just don't want to lose sight of that has been, what we've been doing has been working.
Yeah, it really has. Unfortunately, we saw the numbers creep up again in 2025. The good news with that, though, is that group violence numbers traditionally associated with gangs were very, very far down. And so we are seeing a bigger proportion of our homicides are domestic violence and intimate partner related, which is kind of leading us into then looking and seeing what we could do to try to impact and reduce domestic violence related homicides, because we had a big chunk of them last year, and that accounts for a portion of our increase. So that's an area we want to try to see if there's things that we can do a little bit better to get back to bringing a reduction for our community. And as we are in Q2, we are trending towards a reduction as well. It always makes me a little bit nervous as we enter the summer. That's generally when our numbers start to increase. But I'm hopeful that with the strategies that we have, the proactive approach, the partnerships with community-based organizations, that we're going to be able to keep those numbers down low.
I do want to thank you again for being here, and kind of jumping into our last question. What would, and hopefully this isn't treading over stuff we've already talked about, but aside from the communities things, what do you think is maybe your biggest challenge, either as chief or as a police department? What do you think looking forward now?
Yeah, I think we're just where we are right now. We're in a spot where we're going to need to be very efficient and we should always strive to be efficient, right?
Sure.
But to be very efficient with our dollars. We are not in a growth phase right now, and so being able to be efficient is one of those areas. And some of those efficiencies come in certain ways, like technology. And as we're looking to evolve, and there's lots of technology, surrounding law enforcement, modern law enforcement, and policing right now, trying to take a look at what some of those pieces might be out there and might be available, which could help improve our efficiencies while also improving our effectiveness. That's an absolute challenge. It would be ideal to get to a spot where we have achieved full and effective compliance with the stipulated judgment with the Department of Justice. That's an area of that's of extreme importance to me as well, is making sure that we're meeting the burden of everything that we said we were going to be able to do, and that we're actually doing it. So that's an area of focus as well, and some of the challenges. But again, as I'm spending time these next few weeks and next few months almost exclusively listening to people and what their issues are, as we start to see common threads and trends coming up, those are going to be areas of focus for me as well. I'm talking about homicides and these major issues, and I can tell you the one thing that I've heard the most complaints about so far is not anything that ever would have been on my radar. It's youth who are trespassing on private property, fishing, right? I mean, several different private locations that have lakes have had some real issues and concerns with trespassing and with teenagers trespassing on their property and fishing, and not something that would have been on my radar 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
But is easily the thing that I've had the most amount of contacts about.
Really?
And so it's just these things that are going to pop up.
Yeah.
Right? There's things they're important to people. So if they're important to people, we're going to make it important too, and see what we're able to do, and our response might not be the same as it is in other areas, but we want to do what we can to help people feel seen and heard.
Kind of to close things out, is there anything you'd want to talk about, or do you have a message or anything that you want to go out to the community or to the public? Now that you've got some listeners here paying attention. Yeah,
I would just say that the mission statement of the Bakersfield Police Department is to partner with our community to protect the lives and property of the people that we serve, and that mission isn't going to change. We recognize that the police department is not capable of handling and solving all the problems that we have within our community, but we do want to partner with the community. We don't believe that while we have all the answers, we do believe that when we're working collaboratively with those in our community, that we're much closer to being able to find some of those answers. And so being able to have some level of engagement and partnership within our community, and having the ability to be able to communicate back and forth, gives us a better chance of continuing to reduce crime and keep Bakersfield the city that many of us remember growing up.
Awesome. Well, that's a fantastic message. We appreciate you coming on and chatting with us today. I hope you felt comfortable and had a good conversation here.
Great. Happy to be back whenever you invite me.
Awesome. We'll have you back, I'm sure. So again, that's Chief Brent Stratton. Just a couple weeks on the job, although it probably feels like a little longer than that. But we do appreciate you coming in. We wish you all the luck in your new role here as Chief. Again, my name is Joe Conroy, and you've been listening to the Something Better podcast. Be sure to hit that subscribe and like button so you don't miss any episodes, and we'll catch you in the next one.